Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Welcome back, friends. Today I drove over to Minneapolis. I was already in St. Paul painting a kid's room. I'm painting a big tree, and then I'm adding this cat that's from his YouTube channel. And then Mom also wants me to maybe do a penguin, which makes no sense. But I think I'll be able to pull it all together. Anyways, I'm sitting with a guest that I met them probably 3 years ago, maybe quite a while. This one's been in the works for a long time. We even did some design stuff and made some stickers that are going to come out at some point in time that haven't made it, but they eventually will. I've been a big fan of this artist for quite a while, and their career has really taken off. So I'm really grateful that they still have the time for me. So welcome to the show, Danni.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me at your sweet place.
Thanks.
This is really rad. So where can people find you? Is Instagram the best way? And it's Lepus Tattoos?
It's Lepus Tattoos and Instagram primarily, just because I don't have the effort for other social media.
I can't keep up with everything either. You know, I wish I could, but it's just way too much. And that's Lepus.
Yeah.
Tattoos. Cool. So where are you from?
So I'm from Wilson, Wisconsin, which is like a little know-nothing town, like an unincorporated, actually.
In like when we're talking Eau Claire, in comparison, where is that?
It's like a little bit more west than Menominee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like right tight.
So if you're driving on 94, is there even like a exit?
If you're for Wilson, no. For Spring Valley, which is where I went to school,
oh,
yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what are your earlier memories of art?
That's an interesting question because, like, I don't think there's an early memory of art because art's always been there.
Sure.
Like, my mom's a painter, so...
Oh, cool. What kind of art? Like, what kind of paintings?
She does, like, mostly, like, realistic work, like, with, like... She does a lot of, like, horses and then, like, painting people's horses that they want done or, like, people's animals that they want done, as well as, like, football helmets and stuff like that.
Cool.
She's just kind of all over the place, and, like, I'm also kind of all over the place as an artist, so it works out real good.
Cool. So what were you trying to do helmets and horses early on, and were you doing cartoon character versions? Were you doing anime versions of them? What were you doing?
That's a good question. I was doing a lot of, I was doing like animals and stuff like that. Cause like I grew up with animals cause I grew up on a hobby farm. So I was just trying to like draw like my horse that was out in the pasture. I'm just like, stay still, please stay still. I need you to stay still. Never did.
Yeah.
It's fine. And then when I was a little bit older, I got really into like Sailor Moon because I was like one of those kids.
Cool.
Then was drawing a lot of anime, and that's like where my love of like line art came from.
Yeah.
Was anime in general, and then just kind of took off from there.
How do you describe your art? It looks like it's heavy line work. Well, it's thinner line work, but it's heavy on the amount of line work. I don't know, what kind of painting is that even referred to? Obviously, that's tattooing, but it's reminiscent of a certain style of painting.
Do you know what Art Nouveau is?
Yeah, I've heard that before. So how would you describe it to people who are like me that don't understand what that is?
Okay. So the way I would describe Art Nouveau is a quote that I heard about writing. So just bear with me here. Mark Twain has a quote, and it's, "I'm sorry I didn't write you a short letter. I didn't have time to." So that basically comes across as when you have to clarify information down to be like as distilled as possible, to make it as clear as possible without like all the noise, it takes a long time to do that. What Art Nouveau is pretty similar it's pretty similar to that, where it's like taking the lines and minimizing it down to like what are the most important lines to get across what you are wanting to get across without all the filler. Does that kind of track for you? Do you get that? Cool.
Yeah, sure. So why do that with tattooing? Because traditional tattooing is like just really heavy lines, right? And that's kind of the point, is it lasts forever. But like the Art Nouveau style, and in general, it looks like it's one pass, fairly thin lines. I mean, they're like black, so I'm sure they last, but like, isn't it hard to not be shaky with that? I feel like you're going into that knowing like this is a difficult way to tattoo.
It definitely is, but like for me, it's just like the results are always worth it. Like it is worth like the pain, the time, the effort to like get that type of result, because it looks beautiful to me. And like I really love and I actually do a decent amount. Like I don't do a decent amount, but I wish I did a decent amount of traditional, because it's also the same philosophy where like you want the line to be able to speak for itself and have as few lines as possible.
Yeah.
So I kind of implement that into what I do, which is like neo-traditional, which is like the newer traditional style of like tattooing. But yeah, I don't know. It's what clicks in my brain. It's what looks nice. I also don't want to try to do too many lines because, as you know, as things like tattoos over time, they expand, and you don't want your lines to just be like slowly expanding into one another, and they have a union that was not meant to be.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so going back to art a little bit more though, when you grow up in a place like Wilson, I imagine they don't have a lot of resources.
Definitely not.
So when did you start, like, a lot of people in a bigger city, you know, they'll be an art kid from middle school. They're already like taking all the art classes and doing all these extracurriculars, but they don't even offer those at a lot of those schools. What did your art look like back then? Were you just painting with your mom all the time?
I was painting, drawing with both my mom and on my own. So like I grew up with like speech impediments and like some learning disabilities. Like reading was hard for me. It was harder to talk as well.
Okay.
I have a really long tongue, so like learning how to like navigate that, and like a lisp as well. And so it's like it was harder to speak. So where I couldn't speak, my art did.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so growing up, you were doing little drawings of Sailor Moon, and I can relate because I was doing Dragon Ball Z, because I feel like every little middle school boy had to try to draw the Super Saiyan hair. But at some point, you're spending a lot of time doing art, so you can see your progression coming. What kind of work were you doing at that point? Do you have any of it?
Don't really have any of it. I was drawing more people in general, just because I was...
Like portraits or full body?
Both. I was doing both. Like basically I was drawing whatever I could see. Like I would go to the library and like, again, I'm dyslexic, so it was hard for me to read, but like the pictures in the book, I'm like, that's great. I'm going to draw this. I'm going to like basically tracing it like verbatim when I was like, oh, I love the way that this line swirls. Let me draw that over and over again for like 10 pages of work, and just trying to like really understand why the other artists made the choices they made so that I could put those choices in my own work. So it was a lot of replication. There were people, there were animals, there was basically anything I could see, I would draw.
Yeah. Were you actually tracing it, like light table tracing it, or putting the piece of paper, or you were looking at them side by side, attempting to? Because those are like different, and that's a lot harder to do, I think.
I was doing side by side, yeah.
Do you think there's still a big place for tracing?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I feel like that's just to like learn the mechanics of this is how this works, you know? Because I'm of the belief of like, well, for myself anyways, I want to do my own work as much as possible. I don't like putting out things that aren't mine. I don't want to copy somebody else's things. Like, but at the same time, those skills that you get from it, you know, even just like the muscle memory of this is how this works is super, super helpful. And now everyone's doing it on iPads. Do you think that's better or worse than doing it physically on paper?
I don't think it really makes a big difference, because like when you're making the movement with your hand, you're making that movement regardless of it being an iPad or a piece of paper. I think a piece of paper might edge out slightly in being more beneficial, just because there's not like a snap to function. Like you have Procreate, I'm guessing.
Right, yeah.
Where if like you hold the line long enough, it'll be like, now it's a perfect like semicircle. And it's like, you can also learn how to draw that yourself. And that's going to be more beneficial for you over time, especially if you have to like, you making murals, you have to like make a really nice semicircle with like a brush stroke or like, and then if you don't have that because you have never practiced it, it's going to be like, oh.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you can't, because on something like Procreate, you can just like tap and undo it, you know, versus like, okay, how do I fix this mistake? You know, I think you kind of have to navigate things a little differently. So at what point did you start thinking art was going to be a career? Was it early on? Because high school, you were struggling with some of those other subjects?
Yeah, definitely. And like when you grow up in a small town and you're an artist, you are given like 3 different professions that you should be, or like, and it's always because like those are the professions that people in small towns have access to as artists. So like I was told like, you should be an art teacher, you should be a graphic designer, you should be a tattoo artist. And so those were always like things that were like percolating in my head, especially because like people could see I had a talent for art, and they're like, this is a thing that you could do and maybe you should do. So yeah, the idea was always there, and I always knew that like I wanted art to be something, a part of me in a meaningful way going forward for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I'm surprised tattoo artist was high on that list, considering where that was, where you're from. I imagine there's not a lot of tattooers. But, one of those things is what I've tried to describe to people is an older generation, such as my parents, being a podcaster and like doing murals and owning a skateboard shop and doing the stuff that I do weren't really like careers that were available to people at that point in time. They don't really have a huge, like a great understanding of why and how it works, so you can't blame them when they don't immediately want to support the decision. Because they don't understand. To them, it doesn't make any sense. They're looking at like, well, what did they grow up with and what are the people that they know, what's familiar to them of how this works. And if they don't understand the mechanics of it and the whole picture, I can understand why they're like, well, why would you do that? Like my last real job was for Verizon. So it was like I had a very straightforward, I got paid X amount for this many hours and I could expect this amount of commission and I was paid well. And there was like a structure to it. Where it's like, as I grow in that, I could be a store manager and I could be a district manager. And it was like, this is a career. Versus then when I opened the skateboard shop, it's just, a scratching head moment for my parents of like, but what's the future? What do you do with that? Versus me, I see like, well, everything grows together. Like now as the show grows, my art grows. As my art grows, my shop does well. And it all is kind of, intertwined. Yeah. What were the first steps that you took towards being a tattooer?
Okay.
And how long ago was this at this point?
Gotcha. Okay. Initially, I didn't think I was going to be a tattooer because, like, when people gave me options of what they thought I should be, you might be able to tell by my everything. I was like a little bit of like a punk kid where I was just like, I'm not going to do what you told me. Absolutely
so
not.
Even though it's tattooing.
Yeah. So like in college during my freshman year, there was a local tattoo shop that was just like, yeah, we want an AFAB individual. And like AFAB means like assigned female at birth, to be an apprentice. And I was like, I'm that. I could do this. I have art. So like I came into the shop with like a folder, like a manila folder of my work. And it was definitely not a great setup. It was not a clean portfolio, but I was like, here, please look at my stuff. And they're like, tight, we love it. Cool. You have the apprenticeship. And I'm like, oh, which is super, super not the case for a lot of people when trying to get into like an apprenticeship. I got real lucky. But it was a really cool opportunity. And then like, that's when it became a real idea of like, this could be a thing. And then as I like began my apprenticeship and I started talking to people and I found out that I really loved talking to people and like getting to know them a little bit better through like a way that like normal art can't do. Like normal art, you're usually like there by yourself or like with a friend. But that's about it. Whereas like tattooing can be very communal because like, if you were to come to me with an idea, I have to take your idea and I have to make it into a thing, but I also have to have my input on it. And it's like a conversation. Right. And I fell in love with that. And that's when like tattooing was just like, yeah, this could be my life. Yeah. And that's cool.
Yeah. It's so much more personal versus me. I want to do work that as many people as possible see. Like, and it's not nearly as personal that way. It doesn't have a super deep meaning, which for what I do makes sense. Like I want to just paint this like big fun character on something where hundreds of people or however many people walk past and go, oh, cool. And that's it. They don't think about it deeper. It's just oh, cool. Versus yours, the number of hours somebody after you tattoo them keeps looking at it day after day, year after year, like, man, that's so rad. I feel like there's a lot more pressure on it in its own way for like that to become its own thing. When you were apprenticing, you kind of have to do the styles of people around you to a certain degree. Were they kind of pushing on you to do anything specific? And then how did you kind of figure out your thing? Because as an artist, you have to be capable of doing other things, obviously, but you kind of have to have your own voice too, which you very obviously have. If anyone goes to your Instagram, it's cohesive. You definitely have that, but it takes a while to develop.
Absolutely. And like, yeah, there was pressure to do like take on anything and everything, do all the things. And I think that's beneficial for tattoo artists because like when you're starting, you don't know what your thing is going to be. And also like you can draw a certain way, but you can tattoo a different way. And it can be very jarring initially, just being like, why isn't this thing translating? But when you are put in an opportunity where like, or a situation where you have to try everything, it can be like, oh, oh, dang, I really, really love doing this technique, but it doesn't reflect this. And then they start to like inform one another. There's a communication between those two different art forms to create something different. And so that kind of is what happened with me. And I feel like almost every tattooer where it's just like, I really enjoy, my art before never really had like shading. I was just like mostly like very like, it was either like hyper realism or like really, really anime.
Sure.
But now I do like a lot of like gray shading with like stipple shading, and I love it so much. It makes my heart so happy, but like it was definitely informed by tattooing to bring that into my new work.
Yeah, well, because you had to find a solution, right? Not everything translates. And that's what I have to explain to people too. Same way with murals. It's like some work translates really well to that. Some work doesn't translate very well to that. And it doesn't make that work not good. It just doesn't necessarily work for it. Thankfully for me, my kind of style, I didn't have to do anything, which was really nice with my art. I was just painting because I felt like it, and started painting what I still, for the most part, paint. And there was no pressure from anyone because it wasn't a career. There was never anyone saying, well, I need you to be able to do this. So I just kind of did my own thing. And what's funny is as I've done that, I've noticed that the skills that I've learned from it still translate to doing other things anyways.
Yeah.
You know, so then when all of a sudden somebody wants me to do, like I did all these band logos not long ago, wanted me to do that. And I was like, well, I don't really do like lettering necessarily. But then I was doing it and I'm like, this is not any different, because I'm drawing something on an iPad, I'm blowing it up, and I'm essentially tracing it. And I like to think of paint as like sculpting, where I'm just kind of moving things, you know, like you lay your initial part down, but then I'm kind of like pushing this curve to be the way I want it, you know, so it doesn't have to be quite as exact necessarily. And then when I'm doing letters, it's the same way. I'm putting down my initial and then I'm just kind of like moving it to where it needs to be to fill in. And then I can step back and go, wow, when did I learn how to do that? Like, I didn't think that would translate. I didn't know I was able to do this. Have you had that experience before where like there was an area of art that you kind of struggled with, or you just didn't think was your thing, and then you were forced to like, oh, you should do that, and then you realized, wow, this works better than I would have guessed it would have worked?
Let me think about that for a moment. I don't think with like drawing necessarily, but like I have a degree in cinema, and then like having like that like cinema experience like translate into making like better reels, that's been interesting. And then like I also really enjoy writing, and then like having like the clarity that I can have within my writing also transfer into how I talk to my clients, and like having them feel like they're informed about what's happening to their body. It's been really interesting to have like those other skills translate into this like type of career. As far as drawing, I'm not entirely, there's probably yes, but I can't think of it for instance.
Sure. Well, and as you start doing your thing more and more, people come to you for your thing.
Absolutely.
So you don't end up having to push in different directions. Obviously, you're always like kind of doing something a little bit unique and changing things around and trying new techniques, but still it's not coming out of left field anymore because people come to you because they saw this thing.
Absolutely.
Right? So I want to know, when you start doing a career, especially if you're an apprentice, your time and everything is kind of dictated by other people telling you need to do this thing. So it's hard to maintain your own identity through that. You kept going to college, right? Like, did you receive a lot of flack for that from people telling you like, no, your focus needs to be on this? How did you maintain that? Why did you want to keep doing that? That's an uncommon thing. Not that many people do that.
That's fair. So yeah, I received flack for it and whatever. I did college for me than I did for anybody else. And I think that's the best reason to go to college for anything, where it's just like, this is purely for like my interests, whether it be to progress my career or for like fulfillment in some other way. For me, as we chatted about, I had some disabilities when it comes to like learning, dyslexia, so on and so forth. And at one point during high school, because like I was pretty sick at that point, like I was doing virtual school for 2 years because like I physically could not go in.
Okay.
I had a principal of a school tell me that I should drop out and get my GED because he didn't think I was going to finish. And so I was like, I grew up being told that I was not adequate and I did not fit this space. So for me, it was a big moment of like proving like I can do this. It's something that I'm capable of. This is important to me. And I want to prove to myself that I can be this thing. And it was really like, a really fulfilling experience to go to college and be like, I'm doing really well. And then in 2020, I graduated with magna cum laude and honors.
Wow.
And that was like, it was like one of the first experiences of being like, I got this. And that has informed my career since, like knowing that like I am capable, I can do this, and I can continue to do things that are hard and that come my way and that other people don't think I can do. So like the people that gave me flack, like that's great for them. I like that they think that they can have a say in my life when they're not the ones living that life.
Right. It's just hard when you're at that age because it's impressionable and you're still figuring out who you are as a person.
Absolutely.
As you get older, people even get to the point of just being stubborn, but they know what they want, you know, so they don't feel the need to necessarily listen to everybody. Like I'm very much of that path of I take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Anybody who gives me advice, I look at it and go, okay, I've lived the 33 years of my life right here. I can make the most informed, educated decision. But I'm asking your opinion just because I'm curious what you think of it. Doesn't mean I'm going to go with that literally at all. It's just a matter of like, I can take what you guys think. But when you're younger, you're still figuring it out. And you're like, maybe you know what I should do better because I have no idea, you know? So you tend to go with those things. What did you learn most from college? I think a lot of people learn just the like determination of I'm going to set out to do this thing that's not going to come easily. And then once I achieve it, like you had said, it kind of gives you that confidence of, oh, okay, I am really capable of anything. I kind of think that's like the biggest lesson learned, more so than any of the actual subject matter a lot of the times. But what were the really beneficial things to you about actually going to school?
So I kind of see it the same way as I see tattooing, where you're just kind of forced to learn different things. You're forced to, because there's like, you know, you have to do like these certain classes, even though they don't really pertain to your major. And by doing that, I discovered a love of writing. I discovered a love of reading, which was unheard of for me as somebody with dyslexia, where it's just like, oh, that's a new thing. Sure. So like learning new things in a capacity and like being forced to learn new things was really interesting. And knowing that like I am not limited to this one little art sphere that I had been designated to, like all throughout like elementary, middle school, high school, because like I was always the art kid, but I could never be anything else but the art kid. So like being like I can be a person that has a voice, I can like write poetry, I can like write short stories and like screenplays. That's amazing. So that was really beneficial for me. And like also going back to the advice thing, I think very early on I knew that like there's a quote that's, if you wouldn't take advice from somebody, why would you take critique from them?
Right.
And so like when people are just like, why are you doing this? You shouldn't be doing this. I'm like, I don't know if you're living the life that I want to live. So like, thank you for your opinion. I'm going to keep doing me.
Yeah. And building that confidence behind your work and knowing yourself is super important. A lot of people live exclusively to try to please other people. And a lot of times I don't think it's like intentional. It's just people are kind of going through the motions. That's what they're used to. You know, it's that positive reinforcement of like after high school, after college or whatever, they're doing these things, they get promoted, pat on the back from everyone around them. And it's just, you keep going on with that. Breaking out of that cycle is really hard for a lot of people. And not everybody even wants to. A lot of people like to have that structure directly in front of them. So going back to knowing cinematography, and you're talking about making reels and stuff, a lot of people don't understand how much goes into what you do or what I do. There's a lot more to it in order to be successful. What are the main parts of it that you have to do nowadays that are built into your career? What do you spend your time doing in order to make things work? Other than just the drawing and tattooing aspect.
I never would have expected that I would be following people on Instagram that are like, here's how to blow up your reels or like get more followers. And like, that's like social media strategy is not like something that I never ever wanted to touch on. And if I could like not, I wouldn't, but here we are having to be like, how do you play this game? How do you change your content to an ever-changing algorithm that like there are no rules to? There's like no stated rules where it's just like, there's an update and that's a thing now, I guess. And you know, reels aren't it anymore. It's carousels on Instagram or it's like photos on Instagram. And it's just like, it's never like, I never wanted to be in a place where it's just like ever changing and like having to abide by somebody else's rules. But Instagram is like, that's what you got to do, buddy, if you want to succeed here. And so there's that. And then, I think that's like the major thing that I was not expecting from this career, to have to be like a social media influencer, a content creator. That's
no, I agree, because just the connotation of what it is, and obviously in your own like facial features when you say that, that's the thing that everyone feels when you're like, oh, I'm an influencer, oh, I make content, blah blah blah. It's like, but what people like need to understand is a lot of your job has to do with advertising, right? And it's anybody's job. I always tell people one of the most successful skills is to be able to sell yourself as a solution to people's needs. Even if you're a doctor, you still have to sell yourself as, I'm the right one for this, right? And what social media is the largest advertising highway that exists. It's the biggest one. It's in front of everybody. And the more people that see your billboard over and over again, the better your business is going to do, kind of regardless of what it is. And I'm of the same feeling with you of like, personally, I don't, and I'm sure everyone says it, but I don't care. And I really wish I didn't personally have to have one at all, because personally, I don't care. It's just kind of a really helpful tool. But I found that like, if I'm not playing the game of how this works, I'm really just hurting myself. And people who are too stubborn to want to play the game with it, it's really holding back what their career can potentially do. Anything that is a job is going to have parts of it that you don't love doing. That's why it's a job, right? Even if you really like your job, that's why it's a job. So things get monotonous when you have to do a lot over and over again. You get burnt out. How do you stop yourself from getting into a creative block? And how do you stop yourself from not getting burnt out on tattooing and doing so much like Art Nouveau and whatnot?
Fair. So the way I try to navigate burnout, as well as like just feeling like I'm being pigeonholed into something, is I like to call it following the dopamine, where it's just like, if I have a list of things I have to do, I'm going to, and if I'm not feeling it, I'm going to choose the most fun thing on that list and do that, because I'm still achieving something. I'm still getting something done. And it's like also then filling my cup as opposed to draining it further. And then usually when I have like that momentum and that flow state from getting something done, and I feel like that sense of achievement, I can then choose something harder on that list, and I can like be like, okay, cool. I now have the energy to do this. I now feel equipped to do this because I've already had that like little taste of success with this other thing that's been easier. So just like allowing myself like the space to write out like all the things I need to do, as opposed to being like, there's this one task that I absolutely need to get done. And
do you do that like daily, weekly?
Yeah, probably like daily. Like I'm always adding to my list daily, and then I weekly will be like, okay, what was achieved, what wasn't achieved, take the things that I didn't achieve, put it on the new list.
Have a personal meeting.
Yeah.
I think having direction like that, because again, you just end up kind of wandering, not really on purpose. Even if you're used to a system of something, you tend to go back to just doing that system, and you forget like all these other things that could be happening, that you could be doing, because you're like, oh, well, this is the routine. And the thing is like, when you set off to do something, you have this goal, you see this mountain off in the distance, you can see the pathway. At least that's how my brain works. I can see the path of like, this is the most direct path to get to this thing. Well, if you only keep focusing on that exact way that you thought it worked, the world is changing. That mountain that you're looking at in the distance isn't staying in the same location. So if you walk in the same direction, you're not necessarily going to reach it, because it's changed. Different tools have came up, or, whatever. There's a lot of different things. So you have to constantly pivot. What's been the most recent thing that you've had to pivot with your career and work on and learn?
So me and some friends are working on like opening a business, and that's been a big old pivot, where it's just like, now we're also business owners. That's weird.
Was that something you ever even wanted? It's a lot. When you're tattooing at a different shop, like you have your own clientele, so you have your own business in that kind of realm, but like there's a lot to actually having a physical location, being in charge of all of that.
Absolutely. And like, I am really grateful because I have amazing people that I'm doing this with. Like, they are so like, I can't sing their praise high enough, because they're so like amazing at what they do. And we also have like a diverse skill set amongst each of us, and they make it easier. They make it actually feasible. Because like, could I do this alone? Not well. Like, when I was younger, did I have dreams of being a business owner? Absolutely. I feel like everyone does, like, because they're like, I want this independence, I want to do this on my own, I got it. And then like you become an adult, everything gets a little bit scarier, and it's just like, ooh, I still have to like pay my bills at the end of the day. I don't know if I can take these big risks anymore. But then like having those people that can build that foundation for you and like make you feel safe and secure, and like you can also give them that feeling. It's just like, that is an amazing time. And that's something I've been experiencing lately with this new adventure. So yeah,
it's tough to do that. Finding the right people around you is really difficult. Finding people that care as much as you care about 100%. This thing is really, really hard. For me, I kind of like lone wolfing it. I like working with people, such as like hanging out with you and doing this thing, but I still like, for myself, I know that I'm in charge of everything. If something fails, it's my fault. But if something works, it's because of me. I really like that lane, and I'm trying really hard to figure out how I can kind of break away from that. I don't know if it's possible. How are you able to find your people in your community? So you're non-binary, correct?
Yeah.
I feel like it's already hard for like a female in the tattoo industry. They talk about it quite a bit, about how it's just super, male dominated industry, but then to take it a step further and be non-binary and just a very unique individual. Obviously it helps being in a bigger town than Eau Claire. You're in Minneapolis, right? But how are you able to find your community of people around you, your clients and all that, to really not only accept you for who you are, but to love you for who you are?
So twofold answer. Like, I'm like, when it comes to my personal life, I'm still like figuring that out. Like, I feel like a lot of people just deal with loneliness in general. That's something I deal with, and I'm trying to like figure that out on like a personal level. But what helps both like business and personal is just being sincere. Like, being like, this is who I am. I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to mask that. This is my weird. Do you like my weird? Cool. Our weirds can coalesce together. And so like that sincerity is important, and that helps to like make those connections, like saying like, I care about this thing, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, because people can be like, why do you care about that thing? That thing's silly. Like, there are more important things for you to care about. And it's just like, that's true. There's like a lot of things that I could care about, but I care about this thing. And then other people that also care about that thing can also like meet you where you're at, and like you can chat about it. Like, so when I say like, yeah, I'm trans non-binary, people can be like, cool, I am too. Let's chat about it. Or like, let's have this like little sense of community together, or like just having this like little safe bubble with one another for a moment. But that also means that like you put yourself at risk, because like there's a lot of people, especially as there's a lot of anti-trans laws happening right now, that are like, I don't want to see you. I don't want to have you in my feed. I don't want you to be platformed at all. And so it's really scary. But if my advice to anybody that is like thinking of coming out, like, you can come out in multiple ways. Like, you can come out in like different degrees of different people. Like, for some people, they don't know I'm non-binary, and it's the safest way for me to be. But just knowing that there are people that I can feel safe with, it is important to come out in certain places.
Yeah. It's tough with the internet, but at the same time, I think the internet, again, being a really helpful tool. And I see this with skateboarding. I guess I end up comparing a lot of things to that, because that's like where my background comes from. But skateboarding back in the day, they literally in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater Underground, you had to pick which team you fit in, and there was like 4. And at the time, that's really what it was. It was like, you were one of the punk kids, or you were one of the like kind of gangster kids. You were like, you fit, but there were only a few categories. And if you didn't fit in one of them, you were totally left out. The internet opens up, obviously, trolling and a lot of hatred and a lot of horrible things, bullying. That's a huge issue. But on the other end of the spectrum, you can come out as literally anything, and now 7 or however many billion people are on the planet have access to find somebody like you, because they're like that. So you can just be a lot more niche and find a community and build a community online. And nowadays, so much of people's interaction day to day, which is sad, is online, rather than in person. You can build a lot of really cool friendships and stuff via just the internet. Have you been tattooing and stuff other places? Have you been able to like build connections with people through such as like social media and whatnot to take you on trips to go, tattoo in different places?
Yeah, I've guest spotted a few different places like Missoula and like Denver. And cool. Like I was able to build those relationships because of social media. I was just like, okay, where is a safe shop for me to go to? Yeah. Because like, it's a boys club in some ways still. And just being like, I don't want to go to one of those. So where is going to be safe for me? And I have been able to make those connections. And it's really like, I think the internet is also, like you were saying, very scary. You get a lot of trolling, but you can also make a lot of beautiful connections. It just depends on like how you're utilizing this tool and just seeing it as a tool and nothing else.
Yeah. And I think you get more savvy with it over time. Like for the longest time, I didn't block anybody and I kind of refused to. And then once I started being liberal with that button, man, my life just became so much easier where I'm like, I don't like this person. I'm not going to respond to anything for them. Like if I get a DM from somebody that I'm like, I don't like it, I just block them. And then I really quickly forget that person exists.
Yeah.
They're doing their own thing. Cool. Good for them. But they're like so out of the realm of my consciousness that it's like, wow, this is such a cool tool that I can just like really curate this thing to be exactly the way I want. One thing that's really common is imposter syndrome. And I've struggled with that a bunch of times. And sometimes I'll reach a point where I'm like, no, I am really good at this. Hell yeah, I know what I'm doing. But then I'll still take steps back. Like it's an ongoing battle for me, depending on what the thing is. If I get turned down for a job, as an example, then all of a sudden the self-doubt creeps in of like, am I just not as good as I thought I was? It took me so long to think I was good at all. And now I'm like taking a step back. Do you struggle with imposter syndrome? And how have you been able to kind of push through that?
I mean, the answer is absolutely yes. Like it's really easy to undercut one's own value, especially like there's like the laziness myth where it's just like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I'm like perpetually like when you're taking time for yourself to recharge, that's seen as being lazy sometimes for individuals. And it's just like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not ever going to be enough. And I think everyone deals with that to a certain extent. And I definitely have dealt with that. And it's like, I should be doing more. I don't deserve the space that I'm in. I don't deserve what I have. I've fooled all these people into liking me. And it's like, that's not true. It's really easy to listen to that little voice that's just like, you'll never be enough. But when it comes down to like the end of the day, it's just like, I think I'm cool. And it's really hard to listen to that voice that says, I think I'm cool, when that little voice is just like, you sure? Yeah. So like every time I like make a line, that little voice is like, you sure, buddy? And it's like, yeah, I'm sure. We're doing great. We're doing fine. And it's especially because like it's on a person's skin. It's just like, do I deserve to like take up space? Yeah. And so like that's something that I always have to navigate. I don't think that's ever going to go away. And I think that's also okay that like that feeling of like unease is there, because like I feel like when people are complacent and too confident, then there is stagnation. There is like a lack of growth. And I always want to be growing and like trying my best and like trying to learn new things. But like when you try new things, it's like you're gonna mess up. Yeah. And so like embracing the mess up is just like helped me with my imposter syndrome. Just like when I'm told I did something wrong, instead of having like a shame response and being like, no, I didn't do anything wrong, or like getting defensive, it's just like, this is an opportunity to learn. And just like that little mantra of like, this is something I can learn from. And that also helps like ease the shame and ease that imposter syndrome, because I think the imposter syndrome is rooted in shame. Yeah, I would agree. And I think anytime, if you can flip that narrative in your brain of like, no, I am good, I'm just not that great at this thing that I just messed up on, but that's awesome because I already was good. And now that I have learned from this, I'm going to be better. Absolutely. You know, because a lot of times it's the stagnation comes from a place of like, I don't know what to get better on. You know what I mean? Like, especially with art, you get fairly good or known at what this one thing is. So something totally out of that realm, it's hard to go do because you know you're going to be bad at it. And there's like some expectation with yourself and with other people that you can't be bad at anything because you're good at this thing. So it's hard to have the humility of going into like, I know I'm going to be trash at that. But again, if you can look at it and go, yeah, but if I could get even like okay at that thing, then I can add that tool to my arsenal. And now I'm going to grow in general. And you can always like tippy toe in too. You know, like you could take something like, oh, I'm going to try a different kind of shading and I'll do it on my iPad first. You know, like you don't have to immediately go balls to the wall on something. What can we look forward to about this shop? What juicy details can we have about this thing? Is there anything out there that's like public or you're willing to say publicly? So the name of the shop is Cozy Camp Collective. And cool. We wanted something that feels inviting for people. And like some shops, they have like really, really cool, like it's like the cool kids go here type of names. And like, that's amazing. And I want those shops to exist, but I also want the shops for like the people that are like, I'm nervous about day-to-day life and I just want to feel okay and feel like I am enough to be in this space. Like, that's who we want to cater to, like, where it's just like, you are enough in this space. You don't have to be anything but yourself in this space. You don't have to try to act cool. Like, we're not cool. Yeah. Like, I'm relatively cool, but like cool in like a nerdy ways, which is like, art. Is it really cool?
Yeah.
We don't know. So just trying to make a space that people can feel comfortable in is really important to us. We're going to be based in St. Paul. I call it the no man's land. Like, it's right between St. Paul and Minneapolis. We made sure that it was accessible for people that also can't be like, I'm just gonna drive over. And it's like, oh, you need to take the green line? Take the green line. There's bus stops around. So like, accessibility is really important to us. And again, just like trying to create a place where like anyone can feel like they have, like they can see themselves in this place a little bit. That would be our major goal. And like, representation as well.
How many artists are gonna be there? And you said everyone kind of is good at their own things. What areas specifically are kind of more specialized that people would be stoked to discover an artist that does this? Like, this is going to be the place for it.
So there are 3 full-time artists right now, as well as 2 apprentices. So I call myself a professional dabbler. Like, okay. I'm not anything, but like I dabble in a lot of things. Whereas like my friend June, their line work is so crispy and so well considered, and like the flow of their work is absolutely amazing. So if somebody's like looking for, I want a really cool piece that's gonna like really naturally flow of my body, like they're the artist for you. And like my friend Sen, they're such a good storyteller in tattooing. Like, you look at their tattoos and like, that is a story like looking to be spoken about. Like, there needs to be more like mythos around it. And so some people, they do approach tattoos as like, this is my representation of my story on my body. And I think Sen is like the perfect individual to go to for that type of work. And then like for the apprentices, they're figuring that out right now, which is like fantastic, because they're also like, they're not like little 20-year-olds or like little 18-year-olds just getting into the industry. Like, both of the apprentices, Soraya Omid and Amina, they have their own voices. They're both in their 30s going into this, so they're like, we already know who we are as people, and like then figuring out like, how does them as people translate into tattooing. And I'm really, really excited to see like what that looks like for them. And I definitely recommend anybody that's interested following them and watching that journey and that experience, because there's also something really fun about like watching people grow. And so, especially if you're contributing in some kind of way, you know what I mean? Is that a strange thing for you to be in that role, to be in a place of like, I'm teaching now? Because you're always growing and still trying to learn on your own, let alone then trying to help out this other individual. Yes and no. Like, because the imposter syndrome comes back, and it's just like, who are you to teach if you don't know what you're doing yourself? And then that's something that I have to be like very aware with, and like having a conversation with myself. Like, no, I do deserve to be here. I am doing enough. It's fine. You're fine. That's hard to navigate, but for me, I believe in like a division of like, or distribution of information. That's really important to me. Like, I don't like when things are gatekept. I don't like when information is gatekept. And like, as much as like higher academia was very important to me, I don't think anybody should have to go to college to find their worth in that same way. So like, distribution of information is really important. And if I'm going to say that, I need to walk the talk. And this is an opportunity for me to walk that talk. Yeah.
I mean, I like to think of it as, don't you want more people on your team?
Yeah.
Like, when you gatekeep, I feel like it's such a like weak-minded thing. It's like a lack of confidence of, well, if anyone else knows my secrets, they're going to be better than me. It's like, man, I don't want to go into anything with that thought process. I want to assume that by the time this person learns this thing that I can teach them, I'm still going to be better anyways. Or at the things I'm working on anyways, not as a person, but you know what I mean? Like, if they're here and I'm here on this particular thing, in the time it takes them to get here, I should be learning something else. And now all of a sudden I have somebody that's on my team that is really good, you know, and they're going to be able to teach me other things anyways. I would rather like continue to build a network of friends and see them all succeed, because their shine doesn't take away from my shine. It just makes the light in general brighter on both of us.
Yeah.
And I think if you keep that mentality, you're going to go a long ways. People who want to protect their own little secrets and be their own thing, I don't think it ever really works out in the long run. Let's talk about goals. So you're going to open up this store, or this shop, this tattoo shop.
Yep.
But what are more so the long-term goals for you? You've kind of found your voice. You got your master's degree. You're going to have your shop. Like what else are you really trying to achieve?
So for me, I really want to, like mentioned before, professional dabbler. I want to leaning in on that dabbler a little bit more. I want to do different things outside of just tattooing, where it's just like me and my partner, we want to do like a fictional podcast where it's like storytelling within it. I love like storytelling in general. And like also I love the tattooing because it's a story being told between like myself and the client. So
I'd
like,
be a great voice actor. Just saying, I'm throwing it out there.
This is fair. This is true. You have a lot of experience. You've been in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
We'd love to see it. So exploring different like ways of like being present, like putting things out into the world, as opposed to just like, I make tattoos and I put them on Instagram. Look at those. That's it.
Yeah.
Just like, I guess exploring different ways of being. Also on like a personal level, I want to explore slowness. Like, what is it like to live a slower lifestyle where it's just like, what does it mean to romanticize your life? Like, what does it mean to fall in love with the life you have, as opposed to like idealizing other people's lives? That's something I'm also working on for myself. And I feel like I'll be able to work on that more once like all of like the chaos of opening a shop has like eased a little bit. So I guess self-exploration, and then just allowing myself to just like, I want to try this thing. I have the space to. I'm going to try it. Yeah,
and that's one of the privileges of becoming established, right? You work really hard to be able to get to that place where you no longer have to necessarily do anything. You know, like I'm thankful to be in that space too, where it's like if I focused 100% on one thing, I could probably I would improve on that. Like I could continue to improve on that. But thankfully, I don't have to. I can kind of do whatever. So like today I'm painting a jungle scene in a kid's bedroom, not because I have to, because I want to. And then I was like, oh, Danny, we should finally get around to do this. Yeah. Nobody's telling me I have to do this. It's just because I want to. And there's a way, like I will make a living doing it, but like having that freedom to kind of go, well, I can go at my own pace. I can achieve things in the order that I want to achieve them. I don't necessarily have to go by any specific path. I can kind of just like flow. I think a lot of people think of it as like, well, you're either doing the best you can in this thing and achieving it as fast as possible, or you're being lazy. It's like, well, there's a lot of gray area, right? Like everything has a spectrum in life, including like success. And what's success, right? You want to reach a certain peak or whatever. For what reason? To be happy, theoretically, right? So then what is it that you actually need to be happy? You probably already have it in front of you. Doesn't mean don't do anything else, but you probably have it in front of you. So how can you slow down and go, well, what makes me happy? Not what makes anybody else happy. Not what makes like my status compare, my numbers grow. Just like what makes me happy. Let's take care of that. And then with the energy I have left over, I can kind of like put it into some of these other things. I want to get one more thing out of you. I think when you do things that you're passionate about, you get to have really unique experiences that are super meaningful to you. I've gotten to have limitless ones, and I share them too often, so I'm not going to spend a whole long time telling a story on my end. But what's a story of an experience you're really grateful for, but it only happened because you pursued art?
So as a person that's like non-binary trans, I've always felt like a certain level of dysphoria in my own body. And that's something that I'm gonna just have to reconcile with. It's not something that I have to constantly deal with in my own self. But because I pursued art and I pursued tattooing specifically, I've gotten the opportunity to see people love parts of their body and feel at home in their own body because of my art. And that's like one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced in my life, where it's just like to have somebody look at their skin and be like, if I can love this part of me, I feel like I can love the rest of me a little bit easier now. And it's like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this without crying. And then I usually end up crying. And it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when it's something so personal to you where you're like, I would do anything to feel confident and comfortable in my skin, and the fact that you can have that effect on somebody, how can you ever stop then?
Yeah.
You're just like, well, this is my life mission. Like, I have to do this for people because this is so powerful and I can. So therefore I need to. So one more time, where can people go find you? Where can they get a hold of you if they want to reach out and get a question? I know on your Instagram you say no DMs, but I think you're referring to trying to get appointments. Yeah. But how can people best get a hold of you if they have a question that they're like, I can't believe Kristen asked this. He totally blew it. How do they get a hold of you as far as that goes? And then what can we expect moving forward? How can people support? Should they go specifically on your Instagram and follow it? I know we're going to be doing some cool giveaways and stuff, so people got to pay attention for that. But yeah, shout those things out.
Easiest place to find me is Lepus Tattoos _ like Lepus _ tattoos on Instagram.
Which is LEPUS _ tattoos.
Yep. Best place to find me, and people can DM me. Just if you're gonna DM me and be like, how much is this piece, and then send me a Pinterest photo, I'm gonna block you. But if you have questions, I'm accessible there. I also have my email, which is the same at gmail.com, like Lepus Tattoos, blah blah blah, for questions or anything like that. And yeah, I like to stay busy. I like to stay active on those things, and we're gonna be active like with a collaborative post probably or something like that for a giveaway that I'm really looking forward to, that has been in the works for a minute.
Yeah, let's talk about like 2 years.
it's time is irrelevant.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. Thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute pleasure.
It was a pleasure for me too.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.